Sharks and rays have lived in our oceans for millions of years. Yet in the past 4 decades, many species have been pushed towards extinction by humans. Of the more than 1,000 species of sharks and rays, over 25% are considered by science to be threatened with extinction. Many of the rest are approaching this threat level and may reach it if things don't change. To put it simply, we need to stop removing sharks and rays from the ocean at the rate we have been. Around 100 million sharks and probably an even larger number of rays are killed by humans every year. This exploitation rate exceeds the ability of most species to replenish populations, leading to serious declines. One of the main reasons that sharks and some rays are being killed is for their fins, which are used in the Chinese delicacy shark fin soup. This soup fetches around $100 per bowl, making it among the most expensive seafood products in the world. Served at special events like banquets and business dinners, the demand for this soup throughout Asia has fueled fisheries for sharks and rays in over 100 countries. Here is some undercover video I shot in a 4-story shark fin mall in the city of Guangzhou in mainland China, where many of the fins end up. My team is currently investigating the species composition of the global shark fin trade as it flows into Hong Kong and China using DNA profiling. We have found that most fins come from open ocean species like the blue shark. However, about 3/4 of the species in trade, and most of the threatened ones, actually live in coastal areas adjacent to people. For these coastal species, we are trying to initiate conservation in the dark because there are so many open questions about them. Where are they doing well? Where are they doing poorly? What conservation measures will work for them? We will not be able to effectively conserve these animals without this information, and that is where we come in. Many of these coastal species live in tropical and subtropical regions and spend part of their life in the coral reef habitat, where we have started the Global Finprint project. We will obtain answers to these questions that are essential for the development of an effective global conservation strategy for these coastal sharks and rays. This project was launched to survey sharks and rays on coral reefs all over the world. The core funding and support come from Paul G. Allen's foundation, Vulcan. Our objective is to use survey data to better protect these animals. We use baited remote underwater video surveys, also known as BRUVs, to capture sharks and rays on camera. Here is a group of one of the most common species we see in the Caribbean region, the nurse shark, joined now by a spotted eagle ray. Video data like these can be analyzed in such a way that enable us to determine the key factors underlying shark and ray abundance on a global scale. This will tell us where sharks and rays are doing well, and what conservation measures are likely to work for them. We can then help governments implement these conservation measures in areas where sharks and rays need the most help. The project is led by myself, Dr. Damian Chapman, and Dr. Mike Heithaus at Florida International University in Miami. My expertise is in the conservation biology of sharks and rays, which I investigate through a combination of laboratory and field approaches. My research helps to refine conservation strategies for these animals, including the use of protected areas and international trade restrictions. Mike Heithaus focuses on the interactions between predators and prey that shape ecosystems. In other words, he looks at what happens to the ecosystem if predators like sharks and rays are removed. The two of us oversee the entire project and are jointly sampling the Western Atlantic region, from Brazil north all the way to our backyard in Florida. 5 other scientists form the core team of Global Finprint. Dr. Michelle Heipel is from the Australian Institute of Marine Science. She is an expert on shark and ray movements and ecology. Michelle is leading our sampling in the Pacific Ocean and is looking at the role of marine protected areas in shark and ray conservation. Dr. Colin Simpfendorfer is from James Cook University, and he is an expert on shark population dynamics and ecology. Colin is leading our sampling in the Coral Triangle region of the Indo-Pacific Ocean. Colin is also the co-chair of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group, which ensures that our data are used in status assessments for sharks and rays to prioritize species for management attention. Dr. Mark Meakin, also at Ames, is an expert on shark and ray movements and ecology. He is leading our sampling in the Indian Ocean from India to southern Africa. He is especially interested in putting a dollar value on sharks and rays in terms of their role in ecotourism. This valuation is extremely useful for convincing governments to make investments in shark and ray conservation. Dr. Ewan Harvey from Curtin University is an expert on fish ecology and will lead our global analysis of commercially important bony fish, which is an important side project of Global Finprint. Dr. Aaron McNeil is from Ames and he is the lead quantitative scientist, meaning he is modeling all of the data we obtain and looking for informative patterns. Global Finprint is not just this group of 7 scientists. We are training a large group of early career researchers, students, and volunteers. We also channel our funding to a wide variety of organizations working on the ground in many countries around the world. We have united over 40 conservation groups in this globally coordinated effort. Through Global Finprint, we are building capacity within these groups to conduct research, education, and advocacy that will advance shark and ray conservation in parts of the world where it is needed the most. So how do we do it? We navigate to a random spot on the reef at a depth of around 2 to 40 meters. The camera is positioned on a frame and is deployed on the seafloor with 1 kilogram of bait to attract sharks and rays. A rope and a float marks the spot. Each bruv is set at least 500 meters apart from any others set at the same time. On deployment, a snorkeler checks the bruv to make sure it doesn't land on live coral and has proper line of sight. The camera then records whatever swims into the field of view, and after 60 minutes of bottom time we retrieve the bruv. We aim to set 50 to 100 bruvs on every reef that we sample. So what are we looking for? The analyses run by Aaron will tell us what features of a reef determine how many sharks and rays live there. Features that we anticipate could be important are the level of fishing, the amount of prey available, and the proximity to humans. Once we know what features are important, we would be able to predict the abundance and diversity of sharks and rays on reefs that we didn't sample throughout the world. Global Finprint is especially interested in locating 3 types of reef, all of which will be targeted for further on-the-ground conservation work with our local collaborators and governments. Bright spots are reefs where we see a surprisingly high number of sharks and rays, even though these areas are fished. They are places where something is being done right by local governments or communities that is allowing sharks and rays to survive despite some fishing pressure. A great example is Trinidad and Tobago. This nation, consisting of 2 islands, is one of the largest shark fin exporters in the Caribbean Sea, yet our surveys with a local collaborator show that one of the islands, Tobago, still has quite a few sharks. We are now exploring why this might be. Bright spots are places that we really need to study to figure out what measures are in place that are having the desired effect, nurturing these measures locally, and possibly transplanting them to other places. In the case of Tobago, our collaborators are teaming up with the UN and local government to establish a protected area for sharks and rays around the entire island, using Global Finprint surveys as the basis for doing this. We are also looking for reefs that are refuges for the most seriously threatened species of sharks and rays. These species include hammerhead sharks and wedgefishers. These places might be some of the last refuges for these species left in the world and must be identified and prioritized for conservation. Since several sharks and rays are now internationally protected, governments are looking for ways to meet their obligations to these agreements. This includes setting aside protected areas for endangered species, which we are identifying for them. Hotspots are reefs that have very large numbers of sharks or rays. We are typically finding hotspots in places that are remote, very well protected from fishing, or both. Hotspots show us what shark and ray densities can exist on reefs without fishing. They are also areas that our collaborators can prioritize for protection if they are not protected already. If they are already protected, hotspots are places where we conduct public education, show the government that it's doing a good job, and suggest ways to augment their efforts and secure these areas. So how are we doing? We've surveyed reefs in more than 30 countries and territories and will exceed 50 by the end of the project. I'm happy to report that we've been doing very well as we go into the 2nd year of the project. At the halfway point, we have surveyed 200 of the 216 reefs funded by Vulcan. We have obtained additional support and we are now on track to have 400 reefs analysed when we finish up in 2018. A quick look at the data rolling in has already revealed a few bright spots, such as Tobago, parts of Indonesia, and the Philippines. We have found an even larger number of hotspots, including the Bahamas, the northern reaches of the Great Barrier Reef, the Indian Ocean territories of Australia, Palau, and French Polynesia. Many of these hotspots are also refuges for threatened species like wedgefishers and hammerhead sharks. Most importantly, we have established a large and growing network of collaborators on the ground in these countries. They are all working hard to establish real conservation outcomes for sharks and rays that will ensure that these animals do not disappear from our oceans.